It's time for Paleo Radio, only on Secular Media Network.
You are now entering Paleo Radio.
Welcome to Paleo Radio with your hosts Jeremiah Bannister and Joe Elder.
Hello, all you freaks and geeks, all those crazy people who absolutely love this program. My name is Jeremiah Bannister.
And I'm Joe Elder.
And you're listening to Paleo Radio. Boy, oh boy, Joe, it has been a pretty crazy week, and we had a pretty wild day even just yesterday with the Iowa caucuses.
Yeah, there's been a lot that's been going on. There's a few stories that we've covered that we're going to get back into, and there's a few new stories to talk about, which is going to be great.
We're going to begin today talking about the whole controversy with Donald Trump, Fox News, the Fox debate, the Iowa fallout, different candidates we thought might do better or did just as we predicted. We're going to have a whole bunch of fun. It's our post-Iowa election mixer.
Yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. Next, we're going to be talking about Richard Dawkins and the New England Skeptical Society removing him from speaking in an upcoming conference because of some things he posted on Twitter.
Really interesting, obviously going to be controversial.
Obviously, it's going to be talking about the PC aspect of that as well. It'll be fun.
So after that, VA official who allegedly stole $130,000 is reinstated.
Oh, that's just...
Yeah, and other
just
craziness.
Wonderful.
Right.
And then we're going to finish up with the upcoming or the ongoing events that have been happening in Flint.
I'll tell you, and I did just in the lead up, and I posted this on Facebook today. I think I even posted it on Twitter. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Paleo Radio. But I posted over there saying I couldn't even prepare, Joe, for this show without bawling my eyes out. I mean, I was literally weeping, just even preparing for this show. And so, everybody, you're not going to want to miss it. You got to listen the whole time. We're going to be talking about Flint at the end. But we're going to start right out of the gate with a whole bunch of fun here with all the craziness, the whole carnival and circus that surrounded the Iowa caucuses on both sides.
Oh, yeah, on both sides. We have some interesting things to talk about. I'm reading an article from the Washington Post. This is Iowa caucus. Cruz tops Trump while Clinton and Sanders are virtually tied. This is a writing from Jose Del Real. Senator Ted Cruz of Texas scored a hard-fought upset win over businessman Donald Trump in the Iowa Republican caucuses Monday night, while former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont were locked in a virtual tie on the Democratic side of most of the votes counted. Cruz made good on his bet that a methodical campaign organization would eclipse Trump's media dominance in the first test of the Republican voters. With 99% of the precincts reporting, Cruz was beating his rival by more than 5,000 votes, with Senator Marco Rubio of Florida in a close third.
I was not impressed, though. Well, it's not that I'm not impressed. I'm impressed. Because the ground game for Cruz was obviously huge. They knew, in fact, they knew ahead of time, but he'd invested tons of time, tons of money, tons of effort into doing this. And even some sly tactics, like the whole, what was it, Steve King going out there and tweeting that Ben Carson was no longer in the race anymore, and that's a whole thing in its own right. But the idea that it was stunning that Cruz took this, I don't think that was really that stunning.
No, I honestly think when we saw earlier in the debates, Ted Cruz had brought up something about New York values and said, people know what New York values are and da-da-da. He's talking to win the state of Iowa. He's talking to win those Midwestern states that are the landlocked states, Iowa, Nebraska, that sort of deal. So it's not a surprise to me that he would win a state like Iowa, but obviously he has put his eggs into that basket. I don't think he's going to be going into New York or Chicago or even Dallas, Texas, and garnering the votes that he got in Iowa.
Well, and that honestly, that was the one state that Trump wasn't winning in the polls.
True.
For most of the time. Other than that, I think it's Iowa and Texas. I think those were kind of the two. And correct me if I'm wrong, paleoradioshow@gmail.com. Attention, Jeremiah. But, I sit there and say, you don't put a bunch of money into something, you don't put a lot of your attention and focus into something, and you're winning the polls, at least the popular poll in most of the other states around the country, the idea that he took second place only by a matter of percentage points away, and granted, he was right behind him was Rubio, which that was a little bit surprising for people to see him be the one to kind of.
Well, and he's your establishment candidate. You'd assume some establishment candidate's going to be third.
Yeah,
you know, we have two outliers. We're somewhere along that top tier is going to be the conservative centers group.
Do you think that the establishment is going to stick with Rubio, or do you think that it's still kind of up in the air?
I still think it's up in the air. I do.
Who do you think it's up in the air with? Do you think Bush is still in the running? You're
really
one of the guys. Don't you believe that Bush might possibly be the lose it to win it guy?
Yep.
Yeah.
I think when you have a war chest the size of Jeb Bush's, there's a game being played, and I don't think they're even playing the ground game until they have people out of the field and they have it whittled down. Like I really don't. I think that Jeb Bush is somebody who can stick in it. I know I can probably get a lot of people that are going to write me or tweet me and say that that's crazy, and you know what? You may be right, but I just see with the money invested, there's going to be a lot of people trying to pull the rope in his direction all campaign long.
Even if only for the self-respect and gratification of the people who are tethered to his campaign, right? I mean, those people have pride. They're like, we have invested a lot of money. I am going to work my tail off to make this happen. Even if this guy's a bumbler, we're going to make this thing work. You would think that, and you're not seeing a huge defection.
No. I think we're seeing a plan where they say, look, there's a lot of people right now. It's going to be attention grabbing. There's going to be this whole idea of fighting to get people to just look at you. That's not the game we play. People know who you are. We don't play the I'm new, I'm fresh candidate look. Play the game of I'm the guy you've been waiting for, and here I am at the end, just like I said I'd be. Now let's get to work with the political campaign. I do. I think that he's still in it.
You know what is, speaking of eye-grabbing here, Gilmore got 0%.
Zero.
I didn't even know Gilmore was still in the race.
I didn't either.
Honestly, I mean, you watch the news or you read these links and these blogs and articles and stuff, and you follow this kind of thing. And Gilmore, I guess I'm not tapped into the media sources that are really hyped on his campaign because I don't know where these people are. And I mean, they're dwarfed by O'Malley's numbers. And if anybody saw the caucus on television and you had these live shots inside the caucuses where you've got tons of Bernie people and you got a bunch of Clinton people, and they're like, we're going over here to the undecideds, and there's a decent number. And then they're like, here's the O'Malley folks, and literally there's like 7.
Yeah.
There's like 7 of them.
Yeah, 0.6% or 0.6%.
Something redonkulous.
That's actually exactly what it was.
Now, he's out, though.
Yes.
He's not the only one. He's obviously the only one on the left, but you've got Huckabee.
Yep.
He's gone.
Huckabee sayonara.
Yeah, come to find out, Carson is still in, right? Contrary to the claims of Cruz's campaign.
And we didn't cover this, but Ben Carson's campaign fell off the rails. I mean, the people, in the sense of he lost his campaign manager, he lost the financial rep.
Right.
20-some of his people walked out like 3 days later after that, some of his staffers. I mean, he's doing a complete rehaul of his staff right now, too. I mean, it's not just his campaign.
But he got 9.3%. Mm-hmm.
He's not out of the race. He just has a lot of work.
Here's
to do.
the other thing that people forget about with his surge that he experienced, as well as the fame that preceded him, because he's another celebrity type person in this race. Lots of money. Mm-hmm. He's another one of those candidates. He's not going to go away after New Hampshire. It doesn't matter how he plays out in New Hampshire. He can go to South Carolina. Mm-hmm. He can go to other states that come down into the Bible Belt area. He's going to have a lot more people supporting him there, especially with people like Huckabee gone. You're going to see other people start to peel off. Santorum, I don't even know what he's thinking. Why?
I don't know why he's even there.
No, I have no idea.
It's a little bit iffy to jump on what New Hampshire says and what Iowa says, just because New Hampshire's not a great indicator of liberal voting any more than Iowa's an indicator of conservative voting, where Iowa, they're just trying to pander to the evangelical vote, and people who have that vote are the ones who have success in Iowa, but ultimately that means nothing for the rest of the country. And maybe I'm wrong with New Hampshire, but we'll have to look it up. I don't think that New Hampshire is a huge indicator on who's going to be president either.
You know, I'll tell you, we're running out of time here. We got about 90 seconds left. Clinton and Sanders.
Yeah.
What do you? I mean, wasn't that a barn burner?
That was great.
I mean, that was
flipped coins, literally a literal coin flip for it.
I don't know why the headline shouldn't have been. It was a coin toss.
How in the hell can you be so undecided between the two of them? It is a coin toss. Like, literally, I just have to say, there are stark differences between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. I mean, huge differences. Not enough to say that you can whittle it down to a flip of a coin, at least for me.
Well, but that's what it came to. And, listen, you've got a divide in the country that they said has to do with two factors primarily in the way this plays out. Number one is the age. Okay, you've got young people, 30 years and younger. Those people were in the 80 percentile range supporting Sanders. When you go for people 60 or older, you're almost that number, something similar to that number, going for Hillary when you get in that demographic. But we're in the baby boomer stuff. I mean, you still have, I don't mean to sound crass, but from a demographic standpoint, statistical standpoint, they're not dead yet. Like, they're very much still alive and kicking it, and they're voting. They like doing the votes. And so they are going to be a massive, massive force to be reckoned with. And they, unsurprisingly, at least in Iowa, they came out in huge numbers. Yeah.
One thing I think is going to be interesting is seeing how polls are done now, because this is something we don't talk about very often, but it is the truth about polling, if it's not exit polling, is that it's still done through the calling system. And think of anybody that you know that has the call system that goes through cell phones. They don't. They are calling people that have landlines. People that have landlines are not the majority of people, and it's not. I don't think most of the polls that we see, other than exit polling, is fair numbers at this point when we look at them in the presidential race. I just think they're too early to tell.
I think the polls did decent with the Democratic side, honestly. I think that because what happened, it was a toss-up. And it kind of was. Like, I mean, Bernie was saying, I'm not saying we're going to win. I don't know. I think we'll do good. Hillary was saying the same thing. And in the end, when everything was said and done, Hillary 49.9, Sanders 49.6. And I guess I spoke too soon. Maybe it's not even all said and done.
It may not be all said and done. But the segment is. Coming up next, Richard Dawkins and the New England Skeptical Society.
Love Paleo Radio? Join the club. Support our work by visiting patreon.com/Paleo Radio today.
Back to Eagle and Dragon.
Joe, we made an oopsie, bud.
Yeah, had a little oopsie poopsie.
We did episode 23. Actually, this was brought up by somebody. I didn't know if it was a relative of yours or whatever. Matt Elder.
He's got a great last name.
Great last name. Obviously a genius. Wonderful taste in talk radio. But he said this, David Neosi is pronounced Neosi.
Yeah,
I think we said
go.
Neos last time. He's a church-state separation attorney, and he's also a former president of two Washington-based national organizations. You've got Secular Coalition of America and American Humanist Association. And here's the crazy thing. I follow him on Twitter, and I'm like, I follow him, and I felt badly. I'm like, well, we got to say something. And so I encourage people, check him out. It's AHADAVE. In other words, AHA Dave. And you can find David Neosi right there.
Yeah, and thank you for catching that, Matt. We do appreciate the correction. Okay, moving on. We have an article here by Michael Nugent out of michaelnugent.com. What we're going to do here is there's basically an event or something took place regarding Richard Dawkins. There's two articles about it, and I want to read the first paragraph of each, just a sense of an idea of the two different directions we can go down this mountain.
The two different takes. So these are two different articles, Joe. These are two different articles from two different websites.
Two different websites, two different people, two entirely different opinions. This is Michael Nugent. Hate speech is bad. Offensive satire of bad ideas is good. Richard Dawkins was right. That's the name of his article. Richard Dawkins recently and reasonably retweeted a funny animated video of a song called, quote, Feminists Love Islamists on YouTube by YouTube satirist Sci-10 Atheists about using ideology to silence criticism. In response, the New York City Skeptics and the New England Skeptical Society effectively proved the underlying point that Richard was highlighting by publicly withdrawing their invitation for Richard to speak in their upcoming Northeast Conference in Science and Skepticism. They did this unilaterally without discussing the matter to Richard.
So that's the first one.
Yep,
That's the first paragraph of the first one.
First paragraph of the first one. The next one is out of the Huffington Post. This is by Chris Sosa. This is, I'm finally breaking up with Richard Dawkins. So we have ourselves a little bit of a different opinion. He says, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm done with Richard Dawkins. As a teenager, the brilliant scientist was among the first to break through my bubble of petty fundamentalism and push me to think critically about my superstitions that envelope our cultures. I miss the guy, and I have no idea where he went. So
he doesn't like him.
He doesn't like him. And he feels that Dawkins basically has had a cumulative amount of things happen, and he's said enough things where Sosa feels like he's done with Dawkins. Dawkins has gone off the rails. He's been too misogynistic, and he's been too basically not sensitive enough to some PC culture.
A battle between the PC culture and the SJWs. That's kind of like what's happening and manifesting itself in the campaign with Bernie Sanders supporters and Trump supporters.
That's right. It's very wide range of opinion there, isn't it?
Yeah, huge.
So this is Sosa going on to say, the problem with Dawkins has been snowballing for some time. The mounting offenses culminated in the latest online assault, posting video to his entire follower base. Oh, that's all of them, Jeremiah.
Yeah,
the
all
entire
of them.
Base.
Yeah, because that's how Twitter's algorithm works.
That embraces misogyny and feeds into the Muslim stereotypes with an Islamist character complete with ridiculous accent. Quote, it's not rape when a Muslim does it, unquote. This is true. That did come from the video. The posting resulted in Dawkins being uninvited from the Northeast Conference on Science and Skepticism. So we have Sosa feeling like, man, without a doubt, this is the right thing that should have happened. Dawkins was terrible. The video was disturbing. It was awful. And then on the other hand, you have Nugent, who just doesn't feel the same way.
But doesn't Sosa kind of like display that he's exactly kind of the caricature in the video of the feminist, like the language that he uses?
Oh, without a doubt.
For the reason for his breakup. I mean, it's literally kind of an echo of what the video was satirizing. I mean, it was...
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, I will tip my hat here. I'm way more in Nugent's camp than I am in Sosa's camp. I truly believe in the idea of posting something that's an attempt to be funny, hitting and missing, and still being able to do your job the next day, which in Richard Dawkins' case is going to speak. So I do believe in this. I think that there's a separation there that we need to address. But the last thing I'm going to read from Sosa, and we can move on here, but I think this is important. He says, as an atheist, I'm embarrassed that there are so few of us in public. Richard Dawkins is a leader by default in a group that would reject such hierarchy but can't due to lack of visibility. He's holding atheists hostage. But angry, misogynistic white men who try to silence opposition through racial fear-mongering already have a home base, the GOP. They don't belong in movements that reject superstition in the interest of making a kinder, more rational world with fewer boundaries separating us from each other. Now, that's all well and good. I think that the writing of it is well done, and I understand his purpose, but I think he's arguing this from the feminist point of view and not the Islamists. My opinion is you can't play the misogyny card saying, hey, Richard Dawkins, he's being really misogynistic against the Islamic culture.
I don't think they can get away with that.
I don't think you can get that way. And if you're going to hang your hat on the Richard Dawkins is a misogynist and that's why I don't support him, pull that hat right off the rack, brother, and hang it on the I don't agree with Islam because it's misogynistic idea. Because that is a way bigger problem in the world of the feminist movement than Richard Dawkins is with a retweet.
Right.
Way
totally.
more important.
Way more. And, you know, I would encourage people to familiarize themselves with the debate, because I agree with Nugent, too, insofar as this is concerned, to say that these are real areas that we can study and we can focus and try to better understand. And there are some things in here, like, for example, the controversial topic of Muhammad's marrying a young child, a young person. That's one. Ideas inherent within different versions of Islam, and there are many different understandings of Islam that have to do with rape that would be very unsettling for people in the West, or abusing women. Or, and we saw this in all of the retelling of stories to do with ISIS, but there were a lot of people that have been thrown off of buildings for being gay. We've seen this. But some of those people were members of ISIS who were on the taking end of what we would call gay sex. You know, we would say that's what was happening, but the person on the giving end, the way that they understand Quranic law and everything like that, the way they understand that is to say that that's okay on their end, but the receiver is
the punishable one.
Is the punishable one. And a lot of these are younger men. They end up dying. But there's whether or not we in the West say, oh well, that's the real Islam. I don't buy that any more than that's the real Christianity. But that there is an Islam out there that believes stuff like this, and that you can go into many of these countries, and we've talked about it a million times. With the polls, you follow the polls, poll after poll after poll, you've got crazy beliefs like that all over the place against women.
Oh, and I can say with great confidence that Islam is misogynistic. I mean, if people want to argue with me about that, that would be a delight, because it is. It's a misogynistic culture. So is Christianity. Christianity is a misogynistic religion as well, and I don't have a problem arguing that too. We can go back into the book and read it, or we can see how it being practiced in everyday life and the world that we walk around is evident. So, I mean, either way, we want to cut that cake.
And I think Sosa was a little over the top and sensationalistic in the way he described Dawkins. And listen, I should throw it out there. I'm a board member of Center for Inquiry Michigan, and recently CFI merged with Richard Dawkins Foundation for Reason and Science. In fact, the chief executive for the Dawkins Foundation, Robin Blumner, she's become the CEO for CFI as well. And I supported that. Okay, it was something I had to think through. It's part of my role in what I do, and I had to think it through. And I thought through all of this, and part of my calculation, even in my support of the overall thing, was I'm not necessarily the biggest fan in the world of Richard Dawkins. Sure. I don't like everything that comes out of the guy's mouth. I've got a ton of criticisms of him. I've got a lot of praise for him too. I think he's a mixed bag. I think
just like everybody else, right?
And how long he's been cantankerous for a long time. I mean, it's not like this is a new revelation. Oh my gosh, he's grumpy and old. We've known this kind of for a minute. And he's British. I don't know. I mean, people can say that I'm making excuses for the guy, but I look at it and say he's a mixed bag. You like some things to do with him, you dislike some things to do with him, and you can criticize. You can criticize things that he's done or things that he's said. But the idea of saying we don't like what you've said, we believe in free speech, but we think that this is unnecessarily divisive, whatever that means after we believe in free speech, I don't know what this means. But if you're unnecessarily divisive, or anything like that, I think that it's a bad precedent, and I don't think that he deserved it one bit. And I think that it's a bad precedent, not just for him, and not just for the secular community, but speakers in general. I think the idea that you can set up and publicize an event, and all of a sudden somebody's like, "I don't like the tweet you did."
Exactly,
I didn't like your retweet.
Yeah, I think that's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Nugent says in his article, kind of a swing back, the song, like all effective satire, is controversial. It uses stereotypes to convey extreme versions of ideas that in reality fall on a spectrum. Most reasonable people understand how satire works, and most atheists and skeptics are able to recognize the formula when they watch the satirical video or songs by Tom Lehrer, Randy Newman, Tim Robbins, Lily Allen, Sarah Silverman, Tim Minchin, Roy Zimmerman, or Paul Woodfull. So, I mean, being a satirical comic or a satirical writer, that's a real thing. That's hit and miss, too. It's kind of like art. People can say, yeah, I understand why Van Gogh's famous, and that is, but Starry Night's a crappy painting, bro. It's all in terms of interpretation of what's funny and what's not. And I think that what Nugent is touching on here is a real good point of saying that the satirical idea of comedy is to play on the stereotypes as to say that this is to make it a black and white issue, when we know that stereotypes do indeed fall in a spectrum.
And so that we can learn something. Because we have flaws in our ideas, in our world and life views. We have blind spots. We have smudges. We have dark spots. We have things that just simply should not be there. Like, what is it, the Sesame Street song? One of these things shouldn't belong here. I think that it's a lot the same.
Oh, it's definitely a lot the same, and satirical comedy works in people's benefit. It's an effective tool. You can use it to benefit, and I think that taking it and saying that the whole idea, basically what I think Sosa is getting at is this whole idea of making these connections, drawing these lines, and being offensive by using these stereotypes is what we need to get out of not just comedy, but get out of our thought process. I just don't think it's possible, and I don't think it's correct. We need a space to say controversial things.
Speaking of controversial things, as soon as we get back, VA officials allegedly stole $130,000. They're reinstated. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
If you leave, you can't come back in. Paleo Radio will return.
Now back to Joe and Jeremiah.
Want to give a shout out to Mikey Hicks, who wrote on our Twitter, "Just wanted to say that I really enjoy and look forward to your show every week. Thanks for all the hard work you guys do." Thank you for listening, Mikey. That's why we do it, sir.
We love all those fanatical paleocrats out there. Thank you for listening to us, and make sure download the Spreaker app. If you really love the show, make sure to download that. Subscribe to us, follow us, and it will always just come a-flowing.
And get your friends, neighbors, and everybody else to listen to us on Saturdays at 2 o'clock on 95.3 FM, 1680 AM WPRR, Grand Rapids.
Literally every single person in the universe.
That's right.
That's right. Okay, VA official allegedly stole $130,000, reinstated.
Yay!
Look at that. Yay! There's another one under the belt for the VA scandals.
Just racking them up.
All right, this is by Bradford Richardson over at The Hill. A judge on Wednesday reversed the demotion of a top Veteran Affairs official who allegedly manipulated a program to pocket thousands in taxpayer dollars. This is just right out of the first sentence. I just want to pull my hair out.
Yeah, and you can't. And honestly, what happens? You can't make it up. I mean, the deeper we get into this, the more you're going to be WTFing.
Oh, that's kind of neat. The judge reversed that. So, and remember, listen, Graves, one of the people here being demoted and getting the whole thing back, was reassigned, right, to assistant director position on January 6th after an inspector general report found she had created a vacancy in the St. Paul office, which she subsequently filled in order to take advantage of a lucrative relocation stipend.
Okay, so let's break that down into plain English.
Yeah.
So she sees an opportunity for a job that she likes in St. Paul, but someone's already working said job. So she pulls enough strings to get that person removed or fired and then offers to fill that position. And when you do fill that position, if it's a demotion of your pay, then the VA pays you a huge moving stipend, which in this case was over $100,000. So buku dinero for orchestrating said events.
And I should have said this earlier on here. I got kind of just, I'm so befuddled by this whole thing. But we're talking here about two individuals, Diana Rubens. Diana was the director of Veterans Benefits Administration's Philadelphia Regional Office. And the other person in this is Kimberly Graves. And Kimberly Graves is the director of the VBA's St. Paul Regional Office. And they were both demoted because of this whole scheme. Right, this thing they're both doing, making a lot of loot and pocketing that, and then getting off with an easier job. And now it's looking as if both of them actually are going to be reinstated completely.
Completely reinstated. Can you believe that?
According to Stars and Stripes reporter Diana Kane, the VA Inspector General's office released an investigation in September concluding Rubens, the director of Veteran Benefits Administration's Philadelphia Regional Office, and Graves, the director of the VBA's St. Paul Regional Office, had, quote, inappropriately used their positions of authority for personal and financial benefit, end quote, by arranging the transfer of subordinates whose jobs they wanted and then volunteering for the vacancies.
Yes.
This is wicked.
So yeah.
On many levels.
Oh, yeah. I mean, pushing people out and taking their job and taking the pay stipend is crazy. But there's another factor to it. The Veterans Affairs Committee has mishandled the disciplinary action of this, and this is why these people are getting reinstated and, for the most part, keeping the money.
They're right, yes.
It says, this is from Stripes.com, the Department of Veterans Affairs has demoted yet again 2 senior executives who'd been found manipulating the hiring system for their own financial gain. This we know. After the agency botched the disciplinary action the first time. So, in December, the VA rescinded the demotions of Diana Rubens and Kimberly Graves, saying it had inadvertently omitted one of 5 evidence binders that the agency had provided to the 2 officials. The move turned back the clock on not only the punishments, but also their appeals process, which had already begun, adding to outrage over the VA's handling of the case. So you have a problem with it happening. you have a scandal with the whole event occurring, and then you have a scandal with it being mismanaged to the point that their penalty is being rescinded.
Other people losing their jobs.
Man.
Think about it. Other people who may have really liked it. In fact, it seemed to be an enviable position. Right?
Yeah.
It was the envy of the higher-ups, in fact. They said, boy, that's a cush job. I'd like to have that thing with a lot of money in my pocket. And they said, well, we're just going to off you. You're out. We're really sorry. Imagine the lies that they had to peddle when they looked people in the eye. If they even had to, or if they delegated. I think just imagine this in your mind and say, imagine the scenario if they walked up. What kind of lies would they have to say to somebody who's probably crying, losing a job that's probably important, probably crying? What kind of weird paperwork would they have to do to get the person out? I mean, it's hard to let people go in positions and then to say we're going to take it over and take the money. And then imagine, listen, what if they did delegate it to other individuals and said, listen, I need you to take care of this for me.
That's right.
And get that person involved in that. I mean, this whole thing, just even thinking it through a couple different directions, you don't have to be putting on a tinfoil hat in order to say that this thing is completely insane.
I will say this, and now we can take it or leave it, but I'm going to throw a bone to my libertarian friends here. But in private industry, you typically don't get this resolve because the business cannot stay connected to such bad behavior, else it will seriously go out of business. When you have a government entity like the VA, it doesn't have a competitor, and it won't go out of business. It's like the DMV, and they can be as cruddy and as crappy as they would like. You aren't going anywhere, and you aren't doing anything about it. And that, to me, I think, is one of the biggest problems, is there's a disconnect between accountability for these people and what people are expecting of them. And it's just these things do not come together in a lot of government programs.
Back to the Hill here. The Merit Systems Protection Board, the MSPB in Chicago, ruled in favor of Kimberly Graves, the former St. Paul, Minnesota regional director. She appealed her demotion in the wake of the scandal. The ruling, according to the article, the ruling will likely reinstate Graves' senior executive service status and boost her salary, which was cut by $50,000 in the demotion. Now that's a big cut.
Yeah.
And they were saying that they were six figures before, that they were demoted down to deputy status, and they had five-figure salaries.
Yep. And
at that point, now it is back up.
And now they've rescinded those demotions, and this is entirely because they didn't mean to, but did omit one of the 5 evidence binders, and that literally is why this whole judgment and everything has been rescinded.
It's procedural.
Procedural.
And so, hey,
it's just the cat's pajamas, isn't it? Hey, good for you, VA. Just kicking ass and taking names.
Well, Julia Perkins, that's Graves' attorney, she told Government Executive this, quote, Miss Graves is happy the action was reversed, and she looks forward to continuing her life's work serving veterans. I mean, this is
serving them.
Serving the veterans, making sure that they're taken care of. And remember, listen, this whole thing, I mean, it allowed them, right, to not only have these salaries, but to get this special pay and everything, and altogether came up to more than $400,000.
Almost $500,000.
The letting go of people lower down the totem pole out of envy for their position. I mean, that's kind of a David and Bathsheba thing in a way.
And it's not necessarily
right?
It's not necessarily just envy for the position as it is the humongous stipend that you get for taking and moving to a position across the state. That's a demotion. So the way they're angling it to their company is saying, hey, I'm willing to take the hit, guys. I'll take the pay cut. I'm going to go over here and do the work, when really it's less work. You get a huge stipend pay, and you get to kind of handpick where you want to go to do less work. I mean, it's terrible. It's an absolutely terrible thing to do.
When you're talking about Rubens, you're talking about, allegedly, of course, you're talking more than $274,000. Just in the moving expenses, right?
$250,000.
To deal with the opening that took place, right, in the VA there, that was the result of her decision-making.
Missed time and all.
Yeah, and say, well, you're out now. And altogether, $274,000. The other one was $130,000.
Wow.
I mean, altogether, collectively about $400,000.
Imagine your boss. Everybody put in your head who your boss is, or if you have one. If you don't, good for you. But imagine your own boss, and they decide to push you out of your job And by pushing you out of your job, you can't afford your house. And for your boss to take the lower pay that is your job, but to move into your house, they're going to get $200,000.
Unbelievable.
I mean, that's pretty much what that's like.
And the idea, I mean, listen, I wish I had the flyer right in front of me. I mean, it's sickening. It's offensive. But when I went to the VA, and I'm a veteran, 100% service-connected, disabled veteran, and so I go to the VA all the time. And when I went, they had this flyer, right? And there's stacks of them all over the place. And it said something about setting the standard for medical health in the 21st century. And I'm thinking, what kind of crack are these people smoking? You know, what kind of drugs are these people on? And it's the same thing here about, well, she's so happy it's reversed. Now she can go back to totally hosing people. She can go back to telling people to grab themselves by the ankles.
Her life's work.
Her life's work.
Yeah.
I mean, just the whole thing is just absolutely outrageous. I'm glad to see Jeff Miller, what he said. He's the chairman of the House Committee on Veterans Affairs. He said the whole thing is a slap in the face to many dedicated VA employees who do the right thing on a daily basis. By now, there should be no doubt whatsoever that our federal civil service system is in need of drastic reform. Listen, I stand by those words. I believe exactly what he's saying. It's quite obvious. It's grotesquely evident at this point. But you know how long we've heard those words right there? Do you know how long? It's been years that this has been going on. More and more and more bodies end up piling up, like the 300,000 that died that we talked about on one of our episodes. I encourage people to go back and listen to it. Sadly, that was one of our lesser listened to podcasts. I encourage people, go check it out and share it. This is a big deal. Hundreds of thousands of veterans dying. The kind of stuff that's going on, and to see Washington in such disarray and disrepair that they don't know how to, they either don't know how, right, that they're just completely confused, completely ignorant, or they're scandalous along with it.
I think they've pinned their own hands down. You're going to get complacent when it's not a competition. I mean, I know that it sounds a little odd maybe of me to bring this in here, but I truly believe in it. We talk about this all the time. Get a gold card. Get the veteran status gold card. It's a credit card, basically, and you can go into any doctor's office anywhere in America and get the services that you need on having a veteran status gold card paid directly from the U.S. Treasury. That simple, very socialistic, very one-track minded. It's exactly what we need, a simple solution.
Well, there's no simple solution for this, but right after this break, we're going to talk about Flint and the water crisis. You're not going to want to go anywhere.
For debates, interviews, or speeches, contact Paleo Radio Show at gmail.com.
You love to hate 'em, you hate to love 'em. You just can't get enough of 'em, you sick freaks. Paleo Radio's on the air.
I've got my handy-dandy Paleocrat iPhone that I popped off the paleo belt here, Joe.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and there's a little birdie that's been tweeting in my ear here saying that there's a certain David Seastrom that loves the show.
Yeah, he does. And thank you for the listens, David. We really appreciate the love, man.
He said that he wished that it repeated because it's better than any other show. I wish you could put in the world after that. But he said it's better than any other show, that others just kind of read their Facebook feed, and that we obviously prepare our topics.
That is great to hear, and it's good to have you as a friend of the show, David. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, we totally love you.
So let's kick into the next segment. We have Michael Moore, 10 Things They Won't Tell You About the Flint Water Tragedy, but I Will. This is from EcoWatch. News of the poisoned water crisis in Flint has reached a wide audience around the world. The basics are known. The Republican governor, Rick Snyder, nullified the free elections in Flint, disposed the mayor and city council, then appointed his own man to run the city. They decided to unhook the people of Flint from their freshwater drinking source, Lake Huron, and instead make the public drink from the toxic Flint River. When the governor's office discovered just how toxic the water was, they decided to keep quiet about it and covered up to the extent of the damage being done to Flint's residents, most notably the lead affecting the children, causing irreversible and permanent brain damage. So there's a lot of things.
There's a lot of stuff.
Just a quick
here.
recap of what happened, but this is the first of the 10 subjects that Michael Moore goes into. Number 1. While the children in Flint were given poisoned water to drink, General Motors was given a special hookup to clean water. A few months after Governor Snyder removed Flint from the clean, fresh water we had been drinking for decades, the brass from General Motors went to him and complained that the Flint River water was causing the car parts to corrode with being washed on the assembly line. The governor was appalled to hear that GM property was being damaged, so he jumped through a number of hoops and spent quietly $440,000 to hook GM back up to the Lake Huron water while keeping the rest of Flint on the Flint River water, which means that while the children of Flint were drinking lead-filled water, there was one and only one address in Flint that got clean water, the GM factory.
Unbelievable.
So there's one to go.
Yeah, totally unbelievable. Did you see, I don't know if it's the GM factory or where it was, but there's a picture of these very, very wealthy businessmen holding up glasses of water. And there's a picture of it, and they're all celebrating. They're all extraordinarily wealthy. Right? And drinking clean water and making a very big to-do about it. And I've seen that picture kind of floating around all over.
How interesting.
Number 2, for just $100 a day, this crisis could have been prevented. And you know, this is so just mind-boggling. Federal law requires that water systems, which are sent through lead pipes, must contain an additive that seals the lead into the pipe and prevents it from leaching into the water. I mean, this is just an obvious thing.
This is stuff we've known in sanitation, in the realms of sanitation for a long time.
I mean, you do stuff with sanitation.
Yeah, I mean, this is like 101 stuff.
It is. You know, that, and with all of the activism that's gone on with regulations, right? I mean, this is kind of like we know that there must be a law that says something. It would be, I mean, almost commonsensical, doesn't it seem? Yeah. In a way that if you have this water source in this other place that used to take care of it, used to put a treatment in it, and now that it's not there, that group that put the treatment in is no longer doing it, somebody's got to freaking do it.
At some point,
I mean, doesn't
right?
it seem like that's, I mean,
unless you're being completely and utterly dismissive of the public, in which they were.
And they say, oh, we don't need to do it.
That's right. Number 3, there's more than lead in Flint's water. In addition to exposing every child of the city of Flint to lead poisoning on a daily basis, there appears to be a number of other diseases we may be hearing about in the months ahead. The number of cases in Flint Legionnaire's disease has increased tenfold since the switch to the river water. 87 people have come down with it, and at least 10 have died. In the 5 years before there was the river water, not a single person in Flint had died from Legionnaire's disease. Doctors are now discovering that another half-dozen toxins are being found in the blood of Flint citizens, causing concern that there are other health catastrophes which may soon come to light. So there's a plethora of problems coming out of this water source. It's not only treated for the pipes.
Do you know much about Legionnaire disease? It's a respiratory disease, right, caused by bacteria. It says right here, I'm looking at CDC.gov. Look at this. Sometimes the bacteria infect the lungs and cause pneumonia. If so, it's called Legionnaire's disease. The bacteria can also cause a less serious infection that seems more like a mild case of the flu. That form is commonly called Pontiac fever.
Pontiac fever.
I had no idea.
Pontiac fever. How ironic.
Go figure. Point number 4, people's homes in Flint are now worth nothing because they cannot be sold. You know, I saw Michael Moore on The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell on MSNBC, and it was heart-wrenching to even hear this. And this is the first time I heard it. I went back and I watched the special with Rachel Maddow and saw that it was also kind of touched on and hinted at how difficult it's even going to be for any of these individuals to sell their homes, and just how many of them got shafted in the whole mortgage crisis, how many of them are just wildly in debt. So helplessly in debt already, and now their homes, they've got these lead pipes under the homes. They're not even sure if they know exactly which homes have the pipes, where the pipes are.
That's right.
How much it's going to cost per home, how many years. The state right now is projecting 15 years.
Michael Moore says $2.4 billion, and that's going down the economic drain. People in Flint, one of the poorest cities in the U.S. already, don't have much to their name. Many of their only assets, if they have them, are their homes. So in addition to being poisoned, they now have a net worth of 0. And as for employment, who is going to move jobs or start a company in Flint under those conditions? Absolutely no one. Has Flint's future just been flushed down the river?
Who is going to move there? Everyone wants to leave and no one wants to go in.
Exactly. And think about $2.4 billion down the drain. That's
unbelievable.
Terrible. Number 5, while they were being poisoned, they were also being bombed. This is something not many people knew about.
I had no idea.
Here's a story which has received little or no coverage outside of Flint. During these 2 years of water contamination, residents of Flint had to contend with a decision made by the Pentagon to use Flint for target practice. Literally. Actual unannounced military exercises, complete with live ammo and explosives, were conducted last year inside the city of Flint. The armor decided... This is not a joke. The Army decided to practice urban warfare on Flint, making use of the thousands of abandoned homes which they could drop bombs on. Streets with dilapidated homes had rocket-propelled grenades fired upon them. For weeks, an undisclosed number of Army troops pretended Flint was Baghdad or Damascus and basically had at it. It sounded as if the city was under attack from an invading army or from terrorists.
Unbelievable. Unannounced military exercises. Can you imagine?
They've been running on this. This has been a liberal premise, but it is worth driving home. This idea of running government like a business and running it like a bottom line. How about repercussions for that are things like this? Things like running a city to the bottom line and saying, I don't give a damn about the citizenry. I only care about the actual value of things in the city, and I'm basically gonna skin it. I mean, it's disgusting.
It's infuriating. Thousands of abandoned homes. I can imagine a handful of good homesteading acts that would be perfectly fine to fill those things.
Yeah.
They would be much more productive than doing this.
Only when the water's ready.
Number 6, the wife of the governor's chief of staff is a spokeswoman for Nestle, Michigan's largest owner of private water reserves. As Deep Throat told Woodward and Bernstein, follow the money. Snyder's chief of staff throughout the 2 years of Flint's poisoning, Dennis Muchmore, was intimately involved in all the decisions regarding Flint. His wife is Deb Muchmore, who just happens to be the spokesperson in Michigan for the Nestle Company, the largest owner of private water sources in the state of Michigan. Nestle has been repeatedly sued in northern Michigan for the 200 gallons of fresh water per minute that it sucks from out of the ground. That's a large number.
They were going to put that plant in Everett, Michigan.
Sorry for the stutter, but it stopped me in my tracks. I mean, literally, the idea that it's
per minute.
Per minute. That's crazy. Bottles for sale as their Ice Mountain brand. And hey, I buy Ice Mountain sometimes. Not all the time.
Ice Mountain. Check the back if you guys have a chance. Look at the back on an Ice Mountain label. It says bottled and produced in one of the springs in Everett, Michigan, in my hometown.
That's right. You have
that was against the city's wishes as well. This is something that's not ironic. And when you say follow the money, I mean, I know that we can be skeptical about it, but that's the truth. She's a spokesperson for Nestle.
I just don't think it's so devilish. You know, I don't think it's at worst. And this is really terrible. Okay, this is a really bad thing. At worst, it's kind of like a Halliburton problem. You know, you've got a business where you've got relations to people who were in key positions to make decisions. Mm-hmm. That kind of a thing. But the idea that it almost implies this kind of like, look at the crisis, follow the money. It seems to imply almost like that they're behind this as part of the decision was that in the end, after we've given lead poison to a bunch of people, the end result is that we want to really benefit Nestle through having people donate large amounts of money, a lot of times through celebrity people, to get money to then give to Flint. To me, that's a pretty big conspiracy.
Yeah, well, I don't know if the conspiracy is that so much as it is that if this didn't get blown nationally, they could say, look how terrible the water sourcing is publicly. Why don't we privatize it?
I don't know any way to falsify that, though.
That's right, but I mean, I think that's a lot less grand of a conspiracy theory than counting on the good wishes of the public. The idea would be make the private water source looks so terrible that we can really get a gain there to make it privatized. Number 7, in Michigan, from Flint water to crime and murder to GM ignition switches, it's a culture of death. Now, this is a pretty long one. I'm going to skip over it pretty much. It's just bringing up that there's other issues that have been going on in Flint, from murder and crime rates to also GM not recalling some of the ignition switch problems it has. You guys can check that out on this article. We'll link it to the show.
And the murder rates are just through the roof.
Through the roof.
Okay, number 8, don't call it Detroit water. It's the largest source of fresh drinking water in the world. The media keeps calling it this, you know, and the thing is, it's treated at the Detroit water plant. Yeah. But that's it. It comes from Lake Huron.
It's from Lake Huron.
Yes.
Big water source.
The 3rd largest body of fresh water in the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very, very, very old.
Yeah, so it's not just Detroit's water.
I liked how he said Flint is geographically the last place on Earth where one should be drinking poisoned water. So true.
I couldn't agree more. Number 9, all the children have been exposed, as have all the adults, including me. That's just a fact. If you've been in Flint anytime from April 2014 to today, you've drank the water, eaten food, cooked with it, washed your clothes in it, taken a shower, brushed your teeth, or eaten vegetables out of someone's garden, that you've been exposed and ingested these toxins. When the media says 9,000 children under 6 have been exposed, that means all the children have been exposed.
Yeah, all the children, all the people, everybody who's been a child at one point, whether currently or in the long, distant past. If you were drinking this water, and the whole idea of the testing, they say that, let's say you drank some water that was contaminated. If it's more than 48 hours after that test is done, your body doesn't have trace of it.
Wow.
So it's a 48-hour window that you have. You may have been guzzling it.
But you can't tell.
So, number 10, this was done like so many things these days so the rich could get a big tax break. He was talking about the tax break that took place in 2011 that was followed by schools and pensions and welfare and safe drinking water obviously being slashed. You need to go check out this article. It's Michael Moore over at ecowatch.com.
You definitely have to check it out. Thank you guys for checking out yet another episode of Paleo Radio, but it is over.
Time totally flies when you're having a blast.
Yes, it does. Thank you guys so much. Don't forget to like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter at Paleo Radio Show.
And remember, if you would like to keep Paleo Radio independent and commercial-free, all you got to do is go over to patreon.com/Paleo Radio.
It's so easy. Thank you guys once again. We will see you next week.
Hate having to leave, but we'll be back. Have a good night.
You've been listening to Paleo Radio, exclusively with Secular Media Group.